The air is dry. Your lips are already cracking. And the desert doesn't care if you're ready. So step forward. This is the Silk Road. Our road begins in the east, where the Tarim Basin gave way to life. It was once known as Shufu by the Uyghurs, the oasis city. But around the 10th century in Song Dynasty China, records began to describe the city as Kashgar. There are debates as to how exactly the name Kashgar came about, but we do know that both the 2nd century Roman geographer Ptolemy as well as the 7th century Buddhist scholar Huanzhang respectively wrote the city as Kasi and Kasha. This crossroad of empires solicited much trade in the way of caravan and merchant. Of course, such travelers would need proper fueling and rest along the way. Cities like Kashgar offered just that, and because of its crooks' nature, made for exotic relays of food. This wasn't just limited to Kashgar. Fixed food stations known as caravanserai operated in much the same way. These were sprinkled throughout the Silk Road, in both set cities and sparse zones. Now, every chronicler who passed through Kashgar wrote about the same thing first: the bread. In fact, Ibn Battuta, a legendary traveler who crossed half the earth, paused his travelogue just to praise it. In Volume 2 of his work Travels, he wrote that their bread is of the finest quality. So great, we've got our side, but we'll need a main. And we'll find that in a 10th century-esque Uyghur recipe for lamb skewers. But because little remains in food records from the Silk Road today, we'll have to work backwards and use what would have been available in Kashgar during the period. But before we do that, let's talk about what the Silk Road was exactly. First, it was more of a network of routes and passages than a single, fixed path. At its peak, it stretched across more than 8,000 kilometers of land and sea, spanning across China, Persia, Aleppo, and even to Byzantine and Phoenician spears. But goods and people rarely completed the entire journey. Instead, they passed through regional middlemen, Sogdian merchants, Persian traders, and Turkic nomads, as well as countless other groups whose names just never survived. But when the Mongols ushered in the Pax Mongolia under Genghis Khan, the entire network surged back to life. Traders could suddenly travel with a greater sense of security and more standardized rates. They were guaranteed protection, and there were various trade points along the way. And despite the name, it wasn't just silk that traveled the roads either. Entire religions like Buddhism and technologies found their global genesis through these Silk Road networks. And because everyone needs a cook, sure enough, the foods traveled too. But a merchant's meal was never just about meat. It needed spices. And we know that cumin and peppercorns, the defining seasonings of modern Uyghur lamb skewers, were already moving along Central Asian trade routes by the medieval period. Cumin appears in early Chinese medical texts, such as the Ben Chao Gongmu, noted for its fragrance and medicinal qualities, while red peppercorns were a long-time staple ingredient in Western China. Something amusing is that even garlic was considered a medicinal item, not something to be eaten casually. I'll add a few additional ingredients like massaged onions, black pepper, coriander seed, Sichuan peppercorns, and salt. All of these would have been available during the time and line up well with modern recipes. So, with everything put together, we have just what a Kashgar cook would have needed. The fire's waiting. Let's cook our first Silk Road meal. You're going to start with 1 kilogram of all-purpose flour. To that, you're going to go ahead, add in 2.5 teaspoons of salt. I'm going to do around this much here. Next, you're going to add in 2 tablespoons of sugar. If this is your first time around making this, it's better to measure it. But if you've done this a decent amount of times, you can pretty much eyeball things. Give that a little mix. Next, you're going to go ahead and add in 2 whole eggs. Make sure these are around room temperature. That way everything will incorporate correctly. Afterwards, you're going to add in your vegetable oil, 120 grams. You can use olive oil if you'd like, but this vegetable oil just gives us a nice neutral taste. Next up, you're going to add in your yeast. That's 1 entire pack of active dry yeast. I'm using Red Star here, but you can use any that you like. Finally, you're going to add in 440 grams of milk. First, using a spatula, just start mixing everything. And what we're going to do later is we're going to turn this out and start kneading it by hand. So at this point now, you can turn it out onto your clean work surface and back to kneading. And after 15 minutes or so, you should have a really nice, supple dough like this. Look how supple that is. And the test is, when I press into it, share little pats. Like little kisses. Like that. So now, I'm just going to shake this, pulling and turning. So just put a little bit of flour underneath, place this down, and cover it with your bowl for about 1 hour. So now it's been about an hour. Wow, look at that. Look how much it rose. Stick your finger in and the hole stays down. That means you're good to go. So now you just punch it down. And the reason we're doing this is because the first rise, the bubbles are almost always irregular. For the secondary rise, we'll get nice, even, and fluffy. Just take this, and I want you to cut it into 4 sections, okay? Just very simply. Go there, around there, right? Now, you're deep, and then here. So you take these like this, just tuck in those corners of each of them. Using your dominant hand, mine is my right, I'm going to take this here, I'm going to pull back, and my left hand's just going to brace. I'm going to do like this, in a rocking motion. And what you're going to see that do, is it's going to make that top surface become really nice, taut, and smooth. And I'm pulling and I'm pinching in at the bottom. Do that to the other ones. I'm going to cover them with a damp cloth, rag, linen, whatever you have. You're going to cover these for about 15 minutes. Something else I've prepared here is this little infused oil. It's onion. We're going to spoon a bit of that over the top and rub it in before we bake. Okay, now it's time to roll these out. Put these 2 off to the side. Let's use this one. Just press this out, roll it out a bit, lightly, rotate it. Next, I'm going to start shaping this up like a pizza almost. I want you to press out like this. And if it can even help, if you pick it up momentarily and just rotate it like this with your thumbs touching every now and then, to build a little bit of a perimeter. Because we want that outside area more crusty, more of a raised elevation in our center mass. And if they start collapsing on you, just shape it up with your hands, just like that. So we're going to either use a stamp. Now I don't have one, but you can take a fork. And if you want to get a little cool with it, I recommend actually taking 2 forks. So let's grab a second one here. And let's make the second one smaller than the first. And I'm going to do little circles. Iranians, comment down below. Tell me if you know what simple little symbol I made right here. They should know. And I have a little bit of salt water here. You're going to brush the bottom of that with salt water. And that's how it sticks to our little pizza stills in the oven. Dash the surface like this. Put my dough back down. Rotate it a few times. And now, we're going to take some of that onion oil. Just put a bit of that over the top. There you go. So you'll rub that in gently. Just using your fingers, evenly distribute that. Make sure you get that crust too. Okay, so now our oven is preheated to 500. We have some water here. You might be wondering why. I'll show you in a moment. Open sort of quick. You see your steel down there. Gotta move fast. So I'll take that bread, just like so. I'll reach it. Drop it down. I'm sure you heard that. Now, dip your fingers in the water and splash them into there. And close it. There you go. Wow. What a start and what a return. It's been a while since the last time we traveled together. And I want to say thank you. Truly. To everyone who waited, who asked when the next episode was coming, and who encouraged the Savashare channel to come back to life. This was just our first step in our new Silk Road series. And there's so much more ahead. Next, we'll be making our way to Dunhuang, the edge of the desert, caves full of stories, and much more. So, until then, thank you so much for being here. I promise you, there's good things to come. I've missed this, and I've missed you. Stay tuned. What if I told you there was a man who is known as the Banished Immortal? What if I also told you that such a man was a drunkard, a sweetlip, a man too wild for the throne, and too brilliant for the court? But there was such a man. He lived in Tang-era China, and his name was Li Bai. Born in 701 CE, far removed from the golden capitals in the eastern regions, Li Bai had an earnest childhood in the western frontier, modern-day Kyrgyzstan. His family were traders, men of the borderlands, living where Persian caravans, Turkic riders, and Chinese soldiers drifted like dust in the same wind. The Silk Road was the cradle of his imagination. He grew up hearing stories of heroism, mystic hermits, outlaw swordsmen, and wandering scholars. And from an early age, he developed 3 lifelong addictions: swordsmanship, storytelling, and wine. Yes, in fact, the Ju Tang Shu, the old book of Tang, records that Li Bai spent his youth drinking with wandering knights and poets, reciting tales of valor with a cup in one hand and a sword in the other. But his drunkenness wasn't a flaw. No. It was the doorway to his genius. In the year 740, His road twisted toward Chang'an, the beating heart of the Tang dynasty. Li Bai was summoned before Emperor Huanzong, a rare honor for any man, and a dangerous one for a free spirit. But Li Bai was summoned drunk, and his eyes met the gaze of consort Yang Guifei. A woman so beautiful, she would later distract the emperor from governance. In his drunkenness, Li Bai stepped forward, and without preparation, without hesitation, sent the following from his lips. Clothes like clouds, and appearance like flowers. The spring breeze brushes lightly over bountiful dew on her banister. If I don't see her on top of Jade Mountain, then we will meet under the moon at the Jade Tower in Penglai. With these lines, he portrayed her not as a concubine, but as an ethereal being worthy of divine company. For the Jade Mountain were a heavenly, mystical place, and the Jade Tower was the palace of the immortals. In doing so, he praised the emperor himself, but indirectly, elegantly, for only an emperor of heavenly destiny could be matched with such a woman. Huanzhong was won, and Li Bai was immediately appointed to the Hanlin Academy. But if wine was Li Bai's gift, it was also his curse. Instead of behaving like a royal poet, he spent his nights in taverns, wandering through lotus gardens and plum groves, composing verses to the moon, his truest companion. Amidst the flowers, a jug of wine, drinking alone without my kin, I raise my cup at the bright moon. The moon, me, and my shadow have become three people. But the moon does not know the joy of drinking, and my shadow just follows my body. Yet the moon and my shadow are my temporary companions, a joy that can last to springtime. But in the Tang court, brilliance creates enemies, and Li Bai offended one man he should never have mocked, Gao Lishi, the most powerful eunuch in the empire. According to court tradition, Gao once helped Li Bai remove his boots after a performance, and Li Bai, drunk and arrogant, humiliated him. The shame burned deep, and later, eunuch Gao would twist Li Bai's words into a false accusation. This convinced Yang Guifei, the beloved consort of the emperor, that Li Bai had insulted her in a poem. A single rumor, whispered by a eunuch who controlled access to the emperor, was more than enough. Li Bai was expelled from the palace. The banished immortal lived up to his name. After leaving the court, Li Bai drifted, as all great rivers eventually do. He later served Prince Yong during the An Lushan rebellion, but when the prince fell from favor, Li Bai was condemned as well, sentenced to death. At the last moment, he was saved. General Guo Ziyu, a titan of Tang military history, had decided to intervene, because decades earlier, Li Bai had once written a poem defending him during a court-martial in Shaanxi. A poet had saved a general. Li Bai's death sentence was reduced to exile. True to his nature, he never rushed toward the punishment. Instead, he wandered from town to town, reciting poems for fishermen, monks, merchants, and strangers. By the time the news arrived that he was pardoned, Li Bai had never even reached his place of exile. Then, in 762, while on the road home, somewhere between mountains and riverbanks, Li Bai died. Some say, in a fitting myth, that he drowned while trying to embrace the reflection of the moon at night in the Yakshi. But no matter the truth, he truly had become immortal. As we leave the oasis city, push westward through the passes, the landscape changes. Stone replaces sand, and the wind becomes cold, piercing through your ill-equipped desert-laden clothes. We're entering the domain of Persia, the land of poets, astronomers, conqueror kings, and taste savants. Like their architecture, the Persians approached food with a keen eye, refining and compiling vast drafts of medicinal literature until the record was set. Influxes of trade and commerce made them into choice merchants, never idle from the flow of habits and steady by the mind. And of these choice crafts came a drink so impactful that nearly every dessert shared today stems from it: sharbat. But today, the word gets confused. Sherbet, sorbet, sherbet. Many of you likely imagine a soft-serve-esque ice cone, topped with syrups and fixings. And while you are not too removed, the original Persian sharbat meant something very specific. Imagine a sweetened, chilled drink made from fruit syrups or flower extracts, and then mixed with either snow or cold water. It was portable and refreshing, giving even the most taxed of travelers an instant relief. We know this not from guesswork, but from historically attested Persian writings. Persian medical encyclopedias from the medieval period, such as the Canon of Medicine by Ibn Sina in the 11th century, and the 12th century Zakaria Khwarizm Shahi, describe preparations of sharab and sharbat, including syrups made from rose, fruits reduced into thick concentrates, and medicinal drinks sweetened with honey or early sugar. Another ancient Persian syrup appears in multiple sources: sikanjabin, a mixture of honey and vinegar. It was one of the oldest sweet and sour syrups in Iran, served diluted with water for cooling. These weren't modern flavored drinks. They were functional, transportable syrups, carried in sealed containers so travelers could mix a small spoonful with water, or, for a rare treat, with snow. Because Persia had something almost no other civilization of the time did: the yakhshal. These massive domed ice houses were architectural marvels that preserved winter ice well into the hottest months of the year. They were engineered with vaulted interiors and thick, insulating walls. These yakhshals allowed Persians to cool sharbats long before refrigeration ever existed. In later periods, sharbat would go on to influence the likes of Ottoman court drinks, local beverages, and Mediterranean syrups. Even the European concept of sorbet and sherbet stemmed from it. Another example of Persian reach is found in the unlikely loanword of lion in Mandarin. The Chinese word for lion, shi, comes from the Persian word of shir. Lions didn't live in China, but Persian traders brought the stories, imagery, and the word. So what variants of sherbet can we say with confidence existed? What can we pull from them to help us along our culinary journey through the Silk Road? For the sake of honesty, and for the sake of history, We'll build our sherbet using only ingredients that remain consistent across Persian practices. We'll start with rosewater, the crown jewel of Persian fragrance. It appears everywhere, really, in sweets, syrups, medicine. No drink speaks of Persia more than a good rose sherbet. To root it, we'll use the oldest surviving method of honey and vinegar, the foundation of Sekanjabin. Next comes a touch of fruit syrup, most faithfully pomegranate, a handful of mint, lightly bruised and pressed. Then finally, spring water, cold, if possible. Globally, he may be the most famous Sufi poet alive, despite being dead for 800 years. His poems are in every language, his name on every shelf. He's Rumi, Maulana, a man born in modern-day Afghanistan, and yet modern fame has done something strange to him. Rumi is often presented as a floating mystic with no roots, spiritual voice detached from tradition, a soft, universal quote machine. But the Rumi who lived was not a vague mystic at the edge of religion. He was a devoted Muslim, trained in law, theology, Quranic sciences, and his symbolism is soaked into that world. A lot of Rumi quotes online are not even Rumi at all, and many popular translations fully remove the Islamic context, like stripping spice from a fine dish. So, if we're going to meet him, we'll meet him properly, in his own century, on his own road. Rumi was born in 1207 in the Eastern Persianate world, a region tied to Khorasan, with deep association with Balkh. This was a Silk Road universe. Persian was the language of culture, and Islam the intellectual frame. His father, Baha al-Din Walad, was a religious scholar and preacher, whilst also a mystic. That matters, because one of the biggest myths about Rumi is that he lived as a rigid scholar until a single moment changed him. But no, mysticism wasn't a surprise guest. It was already in the home. But the 13th century was not gentle. Power shifted. Dynasties bruised up against one another, and the Mongol warlords loomed over Eurasia like nasty weather. Rumi's family left the east and traveled west, a journey that would eventually chart through the Islamic world. They passed through major centers and cities such as Baghdad, formed pilgrimage, Hajj, to Mecca, and spent time in Syria. Syria would become a nest for the young Maulana, a period long enough for Rumi to become a man, and then eventually reach Konya. Konya, a city in Anatolia, modern-day Turkey, were a frontier of a different sort, a land with deep Christian presence and a growing Islamic scholar gentry. Konya became the home that gave him his name. Rumi means the one of Rum, the lands once called and owned by Rome. When his father died, Rumi didn't fall into poetry. He fell into responsibility. A senior disciple of his father's circle became his guide, and Rumi studied deeply. So deeply, in fact, that he spent years in places like Aleppo and Damascus, cornerstones of Islamic literature and poetry, returning not as a wandering bard, but as a formidable scholar. He was respected as a qadi, an Islamic judge, as an authority. Then, 1244, a man arrived in Konya, and everything tilted on its head. His name was Shams al-Din Tabrizi, Shams was not merely a wandering eccentric. He was educated, trained, sharp, and he carried a kind of spiritual electricity that frightened the higher society. Their first encounter, Shams and Rumi, is remembered in many different ways. But in just about every version, the feeling is the same. Shams didn't just meet Rumi, he struck him. And Rumi, ever the public scholar, leaned inwards. This Rumi, the same teacher of crowds respected in Konya, became a man willing to disappear. Weeks, months, anything when he was stuck in a quiet trance. And thus developed a closeness so intense that even his students began to resent the new Shams. But it would be of his own accord that Shams would vanish, leaving no parting words, only smoke in the air. A smoke that begged for mirrors and yearned reflection. Thus, something new awakened in Rumi. Not a rejection of Islam or apostasy, but a deepening of the inner self, the ego. These gatherings began as sama, devoted listening, where music played the role of remembrance and motion as a prayer. Then the poems started, not polished literature for applause, but poems that were sporadic, perhaps erratic, that sounded like a man trying to survive beauty. He wrote as if the heart were a furnace and language melted. He wrote of love, but not only romance. More so love as the force that moves the cosmos. Love as the gravity that pulls the soul toward God. A fire that burns the ego. He produced massive bodies of poetry, including works associated with his former mentor Shams. And of course, one of his most famous works would be the great teaching epic, the Masnavi. True to its name, it were a real river of stories and spiritual instruction. Some even called it the Quran in Persian. In 1273, Rumi died. In the very city he had come to develop himself, Konya. And of course, the city mourned. Because he had become something rare. A spiritual voice that could speak to a whole city without flattering the truth of his own path. So, if you love Rumi, love him whole. Not as a quote stripped clean for aesthetics, but as a man rooted in worship, trained in Islam, and speaking in symbols that only fully bloom when you remember the soil they grew from.